The power of philosophy. And by philosophy, I mean simple answers to a couple questions that require you to answer them for yourself, within yourself. I came to the tangible understanding of philosophy back in 2010 when I was watching the World Cup final. Spain was playing the Netherlands in the final. As I was sitting there watching the match, I had a few realizations that kind of clicked one after the other, which made me realize not only how Spain's philosophical approach benefited them, but the power of philosophy in life. So, a little background. Spain is made up mostly of Barcelona players. I think at the time it was about 7 of their starters were from Barcelona. And I've been a fan of Barcelona's for about 2 years, watching their games regularly on TV. And Barcelona and Spain were both considered the most philosophical teams in the world. Spain as a national team and Barcelona as a club team. The thing that made Spain and Barcelona such philosophical teams was that they played the same way every time. So people would always ask them, well, do you think you can win with your style? Which of course they were and they did. Or do you think that you can keep doing this? Or how do you feel about your style? How do you feel about these other teams? And their answer was always the same in that we know who we are and we know how we play, and so we're just going to keep doing the same things. And other teams would always be asked, well, how do you feel about playing Barcelona? What about this? And other teams would say, well, we're going to try this, or we're going to try this, or we're going to try to exploit them here and this and the other. They would almost always lose, and then they would say something to the effect of, well, Barcelona's just the best team in the world, or they shut down our strategy, or whatever else. They would have some sort of answer. As a quick little background, Barcelona and Spain play a very possession-based game. So they try to aggressively defend to get possession of the ball, and then they make lots of short passes. It's called tiki-taka. The main thing about it, though, is that they defend very aggressively, and if need be, they'll pass it all the way back, make lots of little short passes in order to maintain possession. This frustrates the opponents. It limits their scoring opportunities and increases Barcelona or Spain's scoring opportunities. And it, in a lot of ways, it gets into their heads because a lot of these, especially the best teams, are used to having the ball so much that by taking the ball away, it really rattles them mentally and emotionally. The first realization that I had while I was watching this game, it was a series of realizations that clicked into place. The first one was that Spain's philosophical approach to the game gave them a tangible benefit, a tangible advantage on the field. The way in which it did this was that it reduced the decision-making of the players, so they were able to make quicker decisions, more accurate decisions, which led to, obviously, better decisions in support of the cause of the team, which is in scoring goals and winning trophies and so forth. This is contrasted by watching the United States play several games in the World Cup, and the United States is a team that does not really have a philosophy. As an example, you could put Spain or Barcelona into random jerseys, cover their faces, put them out on the field against a random opponent, and every time you'd be able to tell very quickly which one is Spain or which one is Barcelona. Their style of play is so distinct. A team like the United States, you could put them in random jerseys, put them against random opponents, cover their faces, and it would be very difficult to tell in any game which team was the United States. Sometimes they attack, sometimes they play a defending game, sometimes they're counterattacking, but there's no real consistency from game to game. There's no real way to identify that, oh, this is the United States playing. You kind of just turn on the TV and hope that they win. Whereas with Spain, you pretty much know exactly what you're going to get. You're going to get 90 minutes of aggressive defending, short passes, probably some pretty amazing chances on goal. Sometimes when watching, I would see a Spain player get the ball or a Barcelona player, and he would pass it without even looking into somewhere else where there was a player or a player running into space. And I would think, how can he do that? But I realized when I was watching that World Cup final that the reason he can do that is because the Spanish players and the Spanish team have answered a couple questions, a couple philosophical questions that allows them to have this tangible advantage. When the Spanish player gets the ball, he already knows who he is, he knows what he's doing, and he knows what the team around him is doing. They have such a strong idea and a strong style about the way that they play, they already know. So he knows that the player is supposed to be into space, and they have practiced it so much they just have that trust that when I get the ball, this other player is going to be there, or this is where people are supposed to be. This is how we all move together and we all do the thing. So when the Spanish player gets the ball, his decision making is much simpler because he knows what is his position there and what everyone else is doing. In contrast, when the United States player gets the ball, he has to stop and think, well, are we attacking? Are we defending? Where is my teammates? What are we all doing? What exactly is happening? The Spanish players had answered the questions for themselves of, who am I? They knew who they were as a team. They knew what they were all about. They had answered those kinds of questions, whether it's in a strategy meeting with the manager or just for themselves. They knew what exactly that they were doing. The United States player on the United States team, they didn't have such a strong philosophical identity. They don't have the answers to those kinds of questions. It's who am I as a United States soccer player? What does that mean? And that translated into simpler decision making for the Spanish player. The Spanish player also, and the Spanish team, they have an idea of who they want to be. They have an idea of how they want to play. They have this idea that if we played the perfect game, it would look like this. And so they have that tangible goal to always be striving toward of, if we played exactly as we want to play, it would look like something specific. Whereas a team like the United States, they don't necessarily have that. If the United States played a perfect game, you couldn't necessarily quantify what that would look like from one player to the next. Everyone would just say, well, it would look like we won. It would look like we scored more than everyone else. Whereas Spanish players all have in mind exactly how they want to play collectively as an 11-person team. The Spanish players also understand how the game works. They understood the context in which they were operating, so they were able to maximize their targets in a way of, this is how we want to play within this framework. The United States players didn't have that. And so therefore the Spanish players knew how they wanted to exist within the game. They knew who they were. They knew who they wanted to be. They understood how the game works, and therefore they were able to translate that into how they wanted to exist within the game. The United States team they didn't know who they were. They don't know who they want to be. They don't really understand how the game works, and therefore, every time they walk out onto the field, it's kind of a crapshoot. It's like, well, we're going to adjust our lineup to try to exploit the weaknesses of the opposing team's lineup. We're going to try to maybe adjust our strategy or our formation in a particular way. Whereas the Spanish team, every time, they know who they are, they know how they want to play, they put the players out there and they play the same way every time. I realized that all of this philosophy, this understanding of who you are and who you want to be and how the game works, and so therefore how they want to exist within the game, all of that resulted in their possession-based style of play, which increased the amount of chances that they had on goal, which increased the amount of goals that they scored, which increased the amount of wins that they had, and increased the numbers of trophies that they won. The next realization that I had as I was sitting there watching this game was that that's exactly how philosophy works in everyday life for every person, all the time. People who have the understanding of who they are, people who have the understanding of who they want to be, people who have an understanding of how the world works, and therefore how they want to exist within the world, people who have a philosophical approach to living, those are the ones who, metaphorically, have the most chances on goal. They score the most goals. They win the most games and win the most metaphorical trophies. And whatever that is, it doesn't have to be production. It doesn't have to be money. It could be starting a family or some sort of personal development or whatever it is that is your particular goal or your particular aim. But I realized that the people who have a philosophical understanding of things and use that as the basis of where they draw the power of their living from, that the expressions in their lives are so much more powerful. And it's very simple. It's not easy, but it's very simple, just in the same way of the soccer game. If the Spanish player who knows who he is, knows how he wants to play, he understands how the game works, and he understands, therefore, how he wants to exist within this system of the Spanish team, within the game, whenever he gets the ball, his decisions are very simple. He has a couple quick options that he goes through, and sometimes he already knows automatically what is the next option because of all of these things that are already in place. And it's the same for a person with a philosophical approach to life. As an example, if I understand myself to be an artist, then when I wake up in the morning, I have two options. I can make art or waste time. Of course, there might be some other little things in there, spend a little time with your family, or maybe I'm spending time marketing the artwork instead or something, which is enabling me to continue being an artist. But in general, You can make art or you can waste time. Whereas the person who doesn't understand who they are, they don't understand who they want to be, they don't have any real conception of how the world works or how they want to exist within the world. Maybe one day they wake up and they just read a book. The next day they wake up, they go work the crappy job that they hate. And then the next day that they wake up, maybe they go watch a movie. Maybe the next day they wake up, they go look for a different job, but they, don't really know what you want to do, but, we'll go look for a better job. Maybe the next day they wake up and let's play some video games. Maybe the next day they wake up and they go run a marathon. Maybe the next day they wake up, one day you might eat a whole pizza. The next day you might eat 2 lemons. There's no real cohesion there. So you might be able to have like good experiences here and there. You could have a fun time or this, that, and the other, but the decisions that person makes are not necessarily going to lead to a consistent pattern of chances on goal and, in the end, trophies won. And the simple reason for that is philosophy, of having that understanding of who you are and who you want to be and how the world works and therefore how you want to exist within the world. And there's plenty of examples of people who appear to be some sort of outlier on that, like somebody stumbles into the great job. And you could put me on Spain, and I'm sure after a certain period of running around, David Villa would score a goal off of my head. So it would appear that I scored a goal. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm a great soccer player or that we're necessarily a winning team or any of that kinds of stuff. There's just a particular amount of, running around on the field. At some point, somebody's going to kick the ball in off of your head or off of your back when you're not looking or something like that. Especially if you don't even look like you know what you're doing. So having a philosophical approach is not a guarantee. Spain loses sometimes. Barcelona loses sometimes. And same way, not having a philosophical approach does not mean you're not going to score any victories. The United States beat Spain in 2009 in the Confederations Cup. But having that philosophical approach, having that simplification in the decision making means that you can then approach all of the problems from the same perspective with a common goal. If you understand who you are and you understand who you want to be and you understand how the world works, you can then figure out at all times how you want to exist within that. If you philosophically understand yourself to be an athlete, then eating cake is no longer a problem. You don't even want the cake. If you philosophically understand yourself to be an artist or a musician or a builder or a husband or a wife or whatever else, then playing 8 hours of Halo every day is not something that you're even going to desire. Because you're going to have these other things that you already understand. You're going to have these other things that you want that are more important than that. And so you realize philosophically that if I am this thing, then I have less options. That doesn't make it easier necessarily. For example, with the chocolate cake, that doesn't mean that, you may still biologically want the cake or you just want the cake for whatever reason. But it makes it simpler for you to understand the context to make the decision. I'm an athlete. I can't have the cake and be an athlete at the same time. So ultimately, the philosophy springs from a place of desire, of desiring to know who you are, of desiring to know what you want to be, knowing how the world works, and then desiring to reach the ultimate fulfillment of those things. I realized while I was watching the soccer game that the philosophy that Spain used as the linchpin of their success in the soccer match in the World Cup to eventually win is the same philosophical ideas that people use every day to accomplish the things that they want to accomplish or not. If I really want to accomplish something, then the way that I approach accomplishing it is not only going to indicate, but probably determine my success in accomplishing that thing. Because Spain didn't just show up and win the game. They spent lots of time practicing together. They spent lots of time preparing. And they also spent the time figuring out the answers to those difficult questions of, who am I? Who do I want to be? How does the game work? And how do I want to exist within the game? And so if you want to change your life, if you want to be doing something different or changing your habits or changing your behavior or doing something else or accomplishing more things or doing any other thing, the first step to that would be to analyze your philosophical approach. Do you know who you are? Do you know what you want to be? Do you know how the world works? And therefore, how you want to exist within the world? And that doesn't necessarily make it easier, but it makes it simpler. And it makes it all the more likely that you'll succeed.